Welcome back. Well, Benny enjoyed his ninth birthday yesterday, so Mom is in there making some homemade cookies for him. It's a day late, but he doesn't mind. And we're so thankful that he's doing so well. In August, it'll be 2 years since he had his very serious cancer that we thought we were losing him to. But thanks to all your prayers and thanks be to God, he had a miraculous turnaround. So I know I've spoken about that so many times. We're very truly blessed and thankful that he's still with us. So I want to talk about the 38 Special and the 357 Magnum. Now, I've kind of talked about them in general in previous videos, but I never really addressed them with a particular video dedicated to them. This is a very fresh cigar. I'm having a hard time keeping it going. But this video, I want to talk about the 38 Special and the 357 Magnum. It's not complicated. The 38 Special was introduced by Smith & Wesson as an improvement over previous 38 caliber cartridges that had been, around. They were pretty weak. And in very small framed guns. But in 1902, Smith & Wesson introduced the 38 Smith & Wesson Special. Now the name, in the tradition of the day, oftentimes, not always, but in the tradition of the day, sometimes cartridges were named for the diameter of the chamber, not the bullet diameter. So it had the 38 Special named for its .380 diameter chamber. The cartridge was an instant success because for the first time, law enforcement could truly have a cartridge that had good power, despite all the stupid things that you hear and read. The 38 Special had very good power. What it didn't have at the time was a good bullet design. It was loaded with a round nose, 158 grain lead bullet, typically lubricated lead bullet, and its performance was very dismal. It just went straight through on tissue. So it didn't have any what you call stopping power because it didn't expand. It didn't cause tissue destruction. And it's tissue destruction, not energy. I've talked about this as tissue destruction. Surgeons do not repair energy problems. They repair tissue damage. That's what goes on. And when you bring game down, it's the fact that half the lungs are gone and the heart is broken in two is the reason why he came down. It's not because the energy didn't push him down on the ground or anything like that. They get hit. An elk gets hit with far more energy when he squares off with another elk than he ever will with a 300 Winchester Magnum or a 338 Winchester Magnum. The energy that those things deliver is not what kills the game. It has no anchoring capability. So anyway, I digress. The 38 Special suffered for years until, and I spoke about this in a detailed video about cartridge development in my video on how to choose a defensive cartridge. But it had that 158 grain round nose lubricated lead bullet, and because it did not have any capacity to inflict a lot of tissue damage, it performed rather poorly. And it not only did it perform poorly in terms of delivering tissue destruction, but it also tended to pierce right through, and it would strike innocent bystanders on the opposite side, going down the street. So many bullets have been designed for the 38 Special. It's once that shortcoming was recognized in the getting on it more, I would say in the mid-70s, departments started calling for something that would provide more stopping power because crimes are starting to change. Even when I first went on the job, you didn't hear too much about violent crime against police officers. That was kind of rare. What you did hear more of was violent crime against the criminal element. They would shoot each other up, but it was not a big. It was, generally speaking, it was not a huge threat for police officers to go out on the street every day. That didn't start to really ramp up until the mid to late '60s. The introduction of drugs, and there's quite a few things that started to increase that problem. The 38 Special is very versatile. Loaded with target Wadcutters, which is a cylindrical bullet that it looks like a little tiny soup can. Loaded with a cylindrical bullet called a Wadcutter, it cuts a beautifully clean hole through the paper. It's full diameter all the way across this frontal area, so when it strikes paper, it cuts a beautifully clean hole. Usually they're only propelled at about 750 or so feet per second with something like 2.8 grains of bullseye. That's a traditional load or something of that sort. Very economical to shoot. And that's what a lot of police departments trained with for many, many years. I would say for the better part of 20 or 30 years, police departments were loading that sort of ammo up to train with until vicarious liability started coming into the scene in the 70s, and questions started being asked in the court by tort lawyers and by criminal defense attorneys and things like that. Well, why are you using that kind of ammo and then you're loading something else in the gun that you just shot my client with? So we had to start shooting the same kind of ammunition, and qualifying with the duty ammunition. But it was very popular and remains very popular target bullet for competitive use. And the fact that it can cut a nice clean hole in the paper means that when it cuts a scoring ring, you can clearly see it cut a scoring ring. And you don't need to use a magnifying tool, a plug, to see if it cut it or not. So it's very popular for that. While we're on the issue of Wadcutters, it is not recommended to use Wadcutters by any means as a defensive bullet. Made of lead, they cannot be driven beyond 800 and so feet per second because they really will let a barrel up very, very quickly. Not only that, but if driven to very high velocities, most of them are hollow base. That hollow base will bulge your barrel very, very quickly if you drive it with excessive pressure. They're just not a good bullet for self-defense. I know that some stupid writers have made it sound that way, but it's not a good bullet for self-defense. There are bullets made specifically for that purpose that have the proper expansion and penetration capacity, both combined. The other bullets that are widely loaded for it, of course, you had the original 158 grain round nose lead bullet, which is still being used, for cowboy loads and things like that. It's a good bullet for that. And it's also an extremely good bullet for small game because traveling at about 850 feet per second or so, out of most 4 or 6 inch handgun, it'll take out a rabbit or a squirrel very easily without doing a lot of excessive tissue damage. And they're accurate enough to take a headshot out to 25 yards or more by most people. So that's a good bullet for that, and it shouldn't be ignored. And the more popular bullets these days for defensive use naturally would be bullets ranging from about 110 grains up to 125, 140 grain jacketed hollow point or soft hollow point jacketed bullets. So those are preferred because, for one thing, they can be driven at higher velocities with their jacketed construction without leading the bore. That is the creation of lead buildup in the grooves and the rifling. And it doesn't take very long. When that starts happening, accuracy immediately starts falling off because your rifling is of no value. It doesn't spin the bullet correctly. Now, bullet construction in the 38 Special for target use is one thing, and for plinking use and small game use is another. But you know, if you're looking for a self-defense cartridge, there's really no finer self-defense or police cartridge for a revolver. And I've spoken about this in detail with my video. I did a video, I think probably about 4 years ago or more, on choosing a self-defense cartridge, and I spoke about those things in great detail. The 38 Special is a very fine law enforcement cartridge and self-defense cartridge. It lacks the capacity of a 9mm, but certainly its ability to penetrate properly, on a clothed individual, and also to penetrate without excessive penetration. They're very good, and the bullet designs now offer very, very competent expansion and tissue destruction. Those are the things that you need in a handgun bullet. One of the things about a 38 Special that favor it over a 9mm bullet is the very fact that the bullet does not have to be designed so that it can feed up a feed ramp. It doesn't have to have feeding issues, so it can be made purpose-built for just the one thing that needs to be built for, which is expansion, without any compromises. And compromises have to be made in any bullet, which has to be fed up a magazine, from a magazine into a chamber. So namely, one thing, they can be made with a soft point that doesn't catch a soft lead point that does not catch the feed ramp. So those, and also with flattened nose, you can use Keith style bullets, which is a semi-Wadcutter design. And that semi-Wadcutter design, I'm going to talk about that with the 357. But when you're choosing a self-defense bullet for the 38 Special, the thing that you should really be looking at is your barrel length, because short-barreled, self-defense guns like a 1 7/8 inch long Smith & Wesson or 2-inch barrels Smith & Wesson or Colt or something, they really the loads that are made for 125 and 140 grain bullets very frequently will not burn correctly in a very short barrel. Those powders are a little bit slower burning typically in order to get those velocities with that barrel length, and as a result, you don't get quite the velocity that's necessary out of a short barrel. So 110 grain bullet is probably a better selection. Even sometimes you can get 90 grain bullets. I think that the 110 is probably the best compromise between bullet weight and penetration and all those other issues. So, and not only that, but it reduces the severity of the snap, so that I can tell you, a lightweight aluminum framed, titanium framed, revolver with a very short barrel can be pretty snappy and difficult to control with a full power, plus P load with a 140 grain bullet or something. So, moving up the scale, I think many departments favored the 125 grain plus P load with the 38 Special. 125 grain bullet performed very, very well. Had good penetration without excessive penetration, and good velocity, about 1,050 feet per second or so, with a 4 to 6 inch barrel. And those are approximations. Depends on the ammo manufacturer and the firearm. revolvers, you know, lose a little bit of their power from that gas, the gas that escapes between the cylinder and the barrel. That gap can create of around 3 to 5 thousandths of an inch, can create some velocity loss. So a little bit of efficiency is lost in that regard. Now the 38 Special is a very good, I think I mentioned, it's a very, very good small game load, and it makes an excellent, lot of fun plinking load out in the field because, you know, just like this gun here, you don't have to worry about trying to retrieve your brass after you get done shooting up a bunch of loads. So if you're a reloader, you know, it's the ideal thing to, you know, be able to eject the brass and, you know, put it back in your pocket instead of having it flung all through the, you know, woods and through the, you know, tall grass or something where you have to police it. You're not going to find it in the woods. I don't know if I mentioned that the reason why I got this critter on right now is because, you know, this is bear season around here, and we have had virtually every night we've had bears around here, and we've had them come out in the daytime in past years. I've got pictures of one came out from right behind this barn one afternoon when my wife and I were sitting on the deck, and the guy just strolled out from behind the barn and he started walking right towards us. And it didn't take very long for us to get up off our seat and get in the house. And he was a big guy. So they do come around, and I'm not fond of the idea of having to deal with them, but you know, I got Benny, he's sleeping under his deck over there. He loves his doghouse. That's his doghouse. He sleeps there. It's nice and shady, although the sun's really not out right now. But so that's the name of that. That's why I got this 44 run. Now the 38 Special case is normally 1.155 in length, and in 1935, I think I told you the 38 Special came out in 1902, and only 33 years later, in 1935, Smith & Wesson came out with the 357 Magnum, and they increased the length of the case to 1.190. And that increase in size allowed them to put more powder in, while still allowing them to maintain the same cylinder length. You might wonder how that was done. Well, they basically, all they had to do, you know, manufacturers love to be able to use the same stuff that they have and repurpose it. The 38 Special had that long, they had a very long, almost conical round nose bullet. It's somewhat of a slender round nose, and with the 158 grain loading. And when they came out with the 357, they lengthened it from 1.155 to 1.190, but they truncated that bullet. They basically cut the nose of the bullet off and made it a little bit squatter and rounder in its girth. Now they both use exactly the same diameter bullet. The 38 Special is named for its chamber dimension, and the 357 Magnum was named, curiously, for its bullet diameter. So, you know, and this is something that manufacturers just do. They just pull this out of their hat. They rule the day. They can name things the way they want, and they have used different things over the years. They don't stick to any particular method. So, you know, a 44 Special is named for its chamber dimension, but when they increased the length of it, they didn't call it the 430 Magnum. They called it, which is what is true bullet diameter, they call it the 44 Magnum. They retained the same naming, which I think was probably to make it sound a little bit bigger and beefier. I suppose Smith & Wesson could have done the same thing with the 357 Magnum and made it sound more ferocious by calling it the 38 Magnum. That would seem to be a little bit more logical, but they followed a different trend. So, or they created a different trend. We don't know. Anyway, the 357 Magnum is eminently more suited to causing tissue destruction because of that truncated design bullet. Because that bullet has a blunt nose, and because it had that sharper shoulder, it immediately caused more tissue destruction, and hence, some of what took place on game was as much attributed to the design of the bullet as to its velocity. Much game was taken with the 357 Magnum at ranges that were, by the time the bullet got there, was not much different velocity than what you'd have with the 38 Special back at the 10-yard line. So, but it performed better because it had a far better design bullet construction. And both of them profited by bullet redesign in the 70s. When bullet manufacturers started to really buckle down and heed the call for, improved expansion on police ammunition, they went to town on that, and they came up with many designs. A lot of it was done through testing by the FBI and different law enforcement authorities, and some of the larger departments. Even our department did some testing. This cigar here is very fresh, so it's not easy to keep going. But the wide variety of bullets now that are available for both cartridges, they're the same bullets that can be used in both. It makes them both extremely versatile. The 357 should never be used with Wadcutter loads because those bullets are just simply going to they're going to possibly harm the gun. They can't be driven at velocities over 850 feet per second tops before they start causing issues with leading. And if they're a hollow-based bullet, they can put a ring in your barrel. They'll pop a ring in your barrel and make a bulge. So they should never be boosted to high pressure. Now, the 357 is very frequently touted even today, and you'll see it written in loading manual. You'll see it written up in all kinds of publications by people who, prominent people who they're target shooters. These people, they shoot for a living. They're gun aficionados. They're used to handling a 357 or a 44 Magnum or a 41 Magnum or a 50 Smith & Wesson. They're used to that stuff. It doesn't bother them. And as I mentioned before, police officers don't join the police department because they like shooting guns any more than a firefighter joins a fire department because he likes shooting water. They don't join for those reasons. They join because the firefighter joins because he wants to help people put fires out to save their houses, and the police officer joins the department because he wants to protect his community and put bad guys under arrest. So that's the reason. And most police officers just simply do not have they have no interest whatsoever in shooting a high-powered handgun, and they would end up being terrible at it. The 357 gained notoriety as a law enforcement cartridge before law enforcement personnel had to actually qualify with those guns, by and large. The lone sheriff out in Oklahoma or something like that, he could choose, if he was a handgunner, he could choose to load himself up with his 357 Magnum and go to work with it, and that's fine. But he wasn't necessarily going to be able to find too many deputies that would be able to handle the same thing. And if he had a large department, it would be very, very rare if he could have more than a couple people that could handle the 357. Once liability started coming into the courtroom arena, I'm going to tell you that I remember when the common phrase was, "You can't sue City Hall." Well, I can tell you what, it's being done regularly now, and they do very, very well at it. People make millions of dollars suing City Hall now, so that phrase is long outdated. And once it was found that police officers, were shooting negligently because they were not receiving firearms training, that's where I came into the picture. That as the first department instructor, certified department instructor with my department, and that was around the same time that all other departments in the country were doing the same thing. They had to start building ranges rather than taking their officers out to the local, sand pit or a dump or something and just shooting at tin cans. They actually had to do some qualifying and some training. Once that started happening, these happy-go-lucky guys that were showing up at the range with their 357s that the department had issued maybe 10 or 15 years before, all of a sudden now they were shamed to find out that they couldn't hit the paper because they were more busy closing their eyes than they were pulling the trigger. So things started to change. A lot of departments started carrying 357s and or maybe had been carrying 357s for many years as a law enforcement round. And when that started happening, they had to pull their horns back, and they had to start carrying 38s. And even though they were carrying 357s in their holster, they were loaded with 38 specials. So that's where the 38 Special Plus P came in, because the manufacturers, with improved powder technology and metallurgy and the handguns and things like that, they could boost the pressures and boost the velocity by 150 or so feet per second, which got them into that expansion range where a bullet would actually expand reliably on tissue. So the next time you read something in a loading manual or in a gun publication that the 357 Magnum is an ideal law enforcement cartridge, you take it from me. I've been there, done that. It was never a good law enforcement cartridge. It was good. It was good in the hands of very, very few police officers who could handle it. And police officers, they're a regulated society. A department has to have, in the day of lawsuits that go to court, the very first thing that a defense attorney will check out, or perhaps a tort attorney will bring out, he'll subpoena the department's rules and regulations on the use of firearms and the use of the type of ammunition that's being issued and all those things. Woe to the department that doesn't have a standard. And if you're a police chief or you're a city administrator, hearken to my words. If you haven't got a standard when it comes to what you carry on the department for handguns and for ammunition, you best think about doing it, because you're ripe for the picking. These tort attorneys will think nothing of putting a lien on your personal property, your house, and the money that was going to go to educate your children. So I digress. The 357 Magnum is a fantastic cartridge for the person who can handle it. It's a very formidable hunting cartridge for game the size of up to deer, pronghorn antelope and things within reasonable range. You can't get silly about it. I know that there are people who will, post videos of shooting game at extended ranges with such cartridges, but it's still a very, very low velocity cartridge. We're talking about a round that a 357 Magnum is somewhere around 14 to 1,500 feet per second with a bullet that's suitable for deer-sized game, and with a barrel length which is good for deer-sized game. You really have to have a barrel that's greater than 6 inches or more in order to be, to get that kind of velocity. It's a cartridge that shouldn't be stretched beyond its limits. When you think of a 30-30, a 30-30 is considered to be, low ball on the totem pole when it comes to deer and antelope. and it should be reduced, down. It should really not be shot at greater than 150 yards or so. That's what it's designed for. Well, you can't be thinking about a 357 Magnum as being 100-yard game cartridges. Definitely not. Striking it is one thing, but being able to cause enough serious tissue destruction to bring it down is another. So it's really a 40 to 50-yard cartridge. That's where its realistic limits are. And deer, for the guy who's a woodland hunter, makes a very very handy hunting sidearm, and he can leave his rifle at home, and he doesn't have to worry. If he's a good shot with a handgun, he can have himself his deer. Bullet weights should be kept up to, I would say, for that sort of game, 140 grains or better. I would prefer 158 grain jacketed soft point bullet for that sort of work. The other type of bullet that's very suitable for hunting with the 357 Magnum is a cast hard lead antimony alloy bullet with a Keith-style bullet, which is a truncated cone with a sharp shoulder on it. So they call it a semi-Wadcutter because when you shoot it at paper targets, they cut a clean, almost as clean a hole as a standard Wadcutter. But they have that truncated cone with the blunt front and that sharp edge, and they do a very, very nice job on deer-sized game. Its designer, Elmer Keith, he basically was the one that designed his own mold for bullets, and so Lyman started making that design mold, and it's still very popular. Other manufacturers have made it as well. So that's a very, very good design if you're making your own hand loads for hunting, whether it's with a 357 or 41 Magnum or a 44 Magnum or whatever it is. It's a very good design bullet, easily made. So that's about all I have to say. Benny, come over here, buddy. It's my buddy. Yeah. Oh, he's good. He's having a good time. He's out here collecting ticks every day. We gotta check him constantly. He had a monster on him this morning on the side of him here. I didn't know what it was. The thing was huge. That's the sort of tick we're not so worried about around here. It's a dog tick. It's the size of a sunflower seed almost, but they're not so bad. The ones that we worry about are the Lyme ticks, the deer ticks that carry the Lyme disease. And he's got one right here. Benny. You're gonna have to get out the. That's a big one too. Crush him. So between ticks and bears, this time of year, we have to be watchful. We have to check him out, and we have to also check ourselves out because he gets up close to us, and those ticks sometimes migrate onto me or Mom. And I've had Lyme disease. I had Lyme disease the first time back about 9 years ago. On 4th of July, I got it. And it really laid me out for 3 days. And then I had it on the anniversary, exactly another year later, on 4th of July. And it may have been what they call an anniversary episode. My doctors did some research and said that there's a phenomenon apparently associated with Lyme disease that they can sometimes, the disease can bubble back up and cause the same symptoms, a year later. So whether that was the case or whether I had another actual tick bite, I don't know. But it's not something you want to get because it really caused a lot of issues with me that some of them are still around today. We're getting off track, but that's okay because it's my video and I can talk about what I want to talk about, huh, Benny? So that's it about the 38 Special and the 357 Magnum. Very fine cartridges, and they're available in all frame weights. From J frame, the the small diminutive J frame for carrying as a self-defense round. I don't recommend that as a, shooting 357 Magnums out of it unless you're really somebody who's a veteran handgunner, because that is one wild gun to shoot. And then the K frame, which was very popular amongst law enforcement personnel for so long. Lightweight, easy to carry all day long. Strong enough to withstand virtually unlimited shooting with the 38 Special, even with plus Ps, and with occasional shooting with the 357 Magnum. And the L frame, which was designed in the, I think that came out about the late 70s, if I remember right. I remember the salesman came in from Springfield, Mass. He didn't work for Smith & Wesson, but his company was right out in Springfield, Mass. He came into the range one day and he showed me my first L-frame stainless gun. I bought one from him for my dad, and he enjoyed it. A beefier frame with a weight underneath the barrel, and just a nice looking gun, pretty gun. It was not something that excited me in terms of carrying it, because that additional weight was just not, we're looking to carry something lighter, not heavier. We really didn't need to have a 357 heavy frame. We were still shooting plus Ps, so, but it was a great size, a great gun. For the hunting handgunner, for somebody who's going to, shoot a lot of 357 Magnums, you just can't get any better than the big N frame. That's the same size frame, which is used in the 45 Colt, the 41 Magnum, and the 44 Magnum. That's a fantastic size for that. It's heavy. It's not something that a law enforcement officer wants to carry on his hip all day. But for the guy who wants to strap something like this on, it's a great size frame, and considerably less recoil than the 41 Magnum, and a lot less recoil than the 44 Magnum. So for the person who's not desirous of a heavy recoiling gun, it makes a very superb hunting gun and cartridge. So that's all I have to say about the 38 and the 357. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all your prayers for Benny, and for everybody who writes in about the videos that I'm posting. I appreciate your comments, and I'll try to catch up with your questions as often as I can. I can't get back to everybody all the time, but I'm trying my best. So don't forget to subscribe and tell all your friends and neighbors about me and Benny, and hit that reminder bell too, so that when I post a new video, you'll get notified. Take care, and God bless.